As a time-traveling woman, Lin Yu has been reborn 3 times, and her first 3 lifetimes have ended poorly. In her 4th life, she thought she was still struggling to survive, but suddenly realized. The former boyfriend of the first generation, who was gentle and respectful, joined the military and became a bandit. He turned into a paranoid, cold-blooded, and antisocial personality, leading the rebel army to cleanse the world. He even proclaimed the slogan that all noble families in the world, except for women from the Lin family, can be killed. The second prince, who was capricious and focused on political affairs, was diligent, frugal, and loved the people. He rushed towards the direction of a wise and virtuous ruler, and finally rode to suppress the bandits. Before leading his army to march, he proposed marriage to the Lin family. The third rebellious and unruly king of northern Rome acted swiftly and completely quelled the internal turmoil. He unified the grassland, marched southward with his army, and sent a letter to marry the Lin family daughter as the Yen family. The 3 kingdoms are in a standoff. Lin Yu. Thief, my goodness. The 4th generation only gave me the script for the traveling girl Marisu, right? Keywords of the novel. Tragic death 3 times, 3 ex-husbands gone crazy without pop-ups. Tragic death 3 times, 3 ex-husbands went crazy with complete TXT download. Tragic death 3 times, 3 ex-husbands went crazy with the latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. Escape. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Escape. Fires lit up everywhere, roaring fiercely into the sky. Lin Yu, dressed in wedding clothes, crouched on a fierce horse and fled towards the depths of the grassland. Today was originally her wedding day. This is not accurate, because when she married on the grassland 3 years ago, she also got married once. At that time, she was only the concubine of King Tsangtao of Beirong. This time, she will be appointed as his consort. But just now, she joyfully went to find him, only to hear him conspiring with his confidants in the camp. Great Khan, now all 7 tribes on the grassland are dissatisfied with your love for that woman from the Central Plains. Not only do you not allow us to go south to plunder food and population, but you also demand that we learn Han Chinese characters. If this continues, it may provoke rebellion. Do you really want to be stubborn? Tsangtao's voice was deep and calm, so what should I do? Upon hearing his tone loosen, the subordinate couldn't help but exclaim excitedly, once upon a time, there was a former king who, in order to ensure his loyalty, made an agreement with them that no matter where his sword pointed, they would obey his orders and shoot arrows at the point of his sword. The first time, he swung his sword at his beloved horse, some of whom dared not shoot arrows and were all executed. The second time, he swung his sword at his beloved concubine, some of whom dared not shoot arrows but were still executed. The third time, he swung his sword at his elderly father, replacing the old king and becoming the new king. Sweat, tomorrow is your wedding ceremony, and all 7 ministries will attend. Why don't you just wave your sword as a sign and order the 7 ministries to shoot 10,000 arrows together, kill the concubine, verify everyone's loyalty, and calm everyone's doubts during the ceremony? Upon hearing this, Lin Yu felt a surge of blood all over his body, his whole body icy cold. She stumbled and took a step back, her golden and jade pendant banging with a crisp clang. The sound in the tent stopped, and she turned around in terror to escape. Before taking a few steps, Lin Yu was tightly grabbed by someone's wrist. She turned her head in terror and realized that the man who had caught her was her husband of this life. She has experienced 3 lifetimes and has received the greatest freedom and most favored favor from him. But at this moment, this handsome man with thick curled black hair, adorned with gold rings, agates, and gemstones, lowered his deep light-colored pupils and looked at her expressionlessly. His profile was already cold and sharp, but now it was even colder and more terrifying. Lin Yu couldn't believe it and trembled all over, saying, "Tsangtao. Are you really going to kill me?" He didn't answer, just loudly called for the guard who had been held back before, holding her wrist like an iron hoop, causing her to feel pain and saying, "Bring the queen back to her tent. Without my command, she's not allowed to leave without permission." Lin Yu cannot pin his fate on his unknown choices. She fled in wedding attire. The wedding dress is as red as blood. It's great, so when she's caught up and surrounded, and killed by a chaotic knife, she can't distinguish whether she's in blood or red clothes, so she won't feel too scared. Before losing consciousness, Lin Yu seemed to hear the direction of the camp, and a faint roar from Song Tao could be heard. Lin Yu. Lin Yu opened his eyes and woke up for the fourth time on the same embroidery bed. He saw the same roof and heard the same greeting. "Miss, are you awake? Do you want to use a bowl of honey water?" She turned her head and saw that Bai Lu was indeed serving on the side. Reborn again. After death, he was reborn to the age of 18. Lin Yu closed his eyes wearily. The chaotic army surrounded and killed. She is becoming more and more promising, reborn for 3 lifetimes, and the scenes of death are getting bigger and bigger each time. Destroy it, this shitty world. Thinking of this, Lin Yu was too lazy to have any nostalgia for his birthplace and only wanted to fall asleep again. "Miss," Bai Lu reminded softly, "don't be too sleepy. If you can't sleep at night, you should feel dizzy again. Madam just sent someone to wake you up. Let's just pretend I'm not awake." Lin Yu collapsed on the bed, closing his eyes, feeling a faint pain all over his body, as if the pain of being trampled into mud by a horse's hooves from the previous life had also been brought into this world, but had not yet dissipated. In such a situation, how could she have the heart to deal with her virtuous mother? Upon seeing this, Bai Lu looked at no one around and quickly approached in a low voice, saying, "Miss, you can't ignore this matter. Mrs. wedding ceremony has already passed. I heard that Madam is already considering Mrs. marriage. Damn it. If it were to go with the flow, my father would have to use his little kinship with the Empress Dowager to marry her to the Crown Prince. She wasted so much strength in her previous life, was granted the title of princess and married far away, and ultimately ended up being trampled into mud by cavalry. Isn't it just to escape the fate of the second prince? Marrying the crown prince, and finally being strangled by Bai Ling. She can never repeat the same mistakes. It seems that this 4th generation still needs to continue working hard. She doesn't believe it anymore. Is it difficult for her to find a way to survive? Lin Yu gritted his teeth, holding his breath, and got up with a face full of anger. Seeing her movements, Bai Lu quickly helped her up and sat in front of the dressing mirror by the window, calling for someone to fetch water and wipe her face. The honey water had already been delivered, and the thoughtful maid swiftly handed the bowl to Lin Yu, only needing to personally feed it into her mouth. As a close maid, Bai Lu's fate is deeply intertwined with her every life. In her past life, Bai Lu married her to the grassland, but soon passed away due to her unfamiliarity with the environment. And the second, the person the crown prince truly likes, is her. Lin Yu shook his head and sighed, thinking that he would probably be with her for the longest time in this life. "You don't need to serve me anymore. You can also go scoop a bowl and taste the sweetness." Bai Lu smiled lightly and said, "Miss, yeah, thank you. I will go later." At this point, the water had been delivered, and Lin Yu washed his hands and cleaned his face. The previous feeling of chaos and dizziness had dissipated a lot, and he suddenly felt much fresher. She held the porcelain spoon and drank honey water, while Bai Lu also cleaned her hands. She picked up a comb and rewrote Lin Yu's hair. After a lifetime, the familiar world will always become unfamiliar again. She had to adapt and get used to temperature, climate, environment, clothing, the appearance of people around her, the voice and tone of their speech again. By the time she finished using her honey water, Lin Yu had already digested the restart of fate and accepted herself as the adopted daughter of the emperor, the princess of Datu, and the concubine of the northern Rong king Songtao, once again becoming the young lady of the Lin family in Nanyang. After Bai Lu finished a bowl of honey water, the two of them went together to pay their respects to their wife. Su Xian, the mother of Lin Yu and the mistress of the Lin family in Nanyang. Does mother love her? Lin Yu stepped into the threshold and saw his mother inside the house, with a self-deprecating smile in his heart. Perhaps it's love. But this love cannot compare to planning for the mother's family, paving the way for the son, and absorbing more glory for the family. In this world, the power of clans is closely related to the fate of individuals. If a clan is strong, it is superior. If a clan is weak, everyone can be deceived. In order to strengthen the power of the family, men who can study will serve, those who cannot study will practice martial arts, and those who cannot study will go to farm. Women, on the other hand, have no other use except for marriage as a bargaining chip and fertility as a value, becoming a tool for exchanging benefits. Is this wrong? From the perspective of future generations, it is indeed a mistake of backwardness, ignorance, and disregard for human rights. But in this era, it is a natural truth. The feeling of being enemies with the world is not pleasant. The education that modern people receive is not appropriate in this era. After the first life of struggle, Lin Yu has deeply understood this truth. Live on. Living is the most important thing. First ensure survival, then work hard to live better, and then do everything within your ability to make the people around you also live well. This is the goal she set for herself. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Hematemesis. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Hematemesis. On the way here, Lin Yu has been thinking of ways to break the deadlock. There is actually no other way. In today's world, the way to refuse marriage is usually through another marriage. At first, the crown prince had little thought or inclination towards his marriage, and he would not cause trouble. Lin Yu also had the empress as a helper. Before she left the capital for marriage in her previous life, she heard the news that the empress wanted to marry the daughter of the Luo family to the crown prince. No wonder she was so unwilling when she became Liangdi, and everywhere she was dissatisfied and disrespectful towards her as the crown princess. This is her external assistance. The empress and the Luo family will both help her work hard to make the empress dowager change her mind. Is it easy for the empress dowager to change her mind? To be honest, it's not difficult. In her previous life, she voluntarily married in order to escape the turmoil in the court a few years later. The great righteousness of dedicating oneself to the country satisfies the Empress Dowager more than becoming a crown princess. In Beirong, from an outsider's perspective, she saw the turbulent and mysterious changes, and the dust settled in the data court. Several buildings rise and several collapse. It was Li who laughed until the end. Will marrying into the Li family be the right choice? Lin Yu didn't know, but she knew that this was the most reliable decision she could make by combining her experiences over several lifetimes. But there are many children of the Li family, who should we make a marriage agreement with? There hasn't been much free love these days, and how one gets along after getting married largely depends on luck. Fortunately, Lin Yu once served as the crown princess, and the political task of Madam Diplomacy was not neglected at that time. She also understood which young masters had harmonious family relationships and which ones fell into a pit of fire when married. It's not difficult to find a suitable husband candidate. She can even find several good ones. It's just that these people originally had their own wives and lovers, and if they use the advantage of rebirth to ruin the already good marriage relationship of others, it may be somewhat unethical. These deeply married couples may be able to hit it off precisely because they met each other. If she destroys the happiness of two innocent people due to her own selfish interests, she also feels uneasy. Fortunately, Li Ying, the eldest son of the Li family, has not yet married. If you marry him, you don't have to worry about harming other innocent women. Although marrying that person won't ruin any great marriage, it still requires careful consideration on how to persuade parents. It is said that when he was born, he had a natural vision, and fireflies flooded into the courtyard. The whole family was amazed, hence his name. But this person is naturally deficient, weak and sickly since childhood, and has a solitary personality. He can remain silent all day and have no reaction to any external activities. The Li family has hired countless famous doctors and alchemists to seek medical treatment, drink medicine, and expel evil spirits, but none of them have been effective. Instead, they have made Li Ying's body worse and worse every time. After the age of 5, he fell seriously ill and was on the brink of death once a year. In the end, he was raised in a Taoist temple, almost 30 years old, and no one dared to discuss marriage. After all, everyone thinks that the identity of Li Ying's eldest son is indeed tempting. If she successfully inherits the position of head of the family, her own daughter can even become the head of the Li family. If she gives birth to a son, the next head of the Li family can have half of her own blood flowing through her body. But if he marries his daughter and dies before giving birth, it would be a great loss. However, in the past few lifetimes, she had never heard of Li Ying's death, indicating that his physique was not so weak either. With a plan in mind, Lin Yu felt a little relieved. She bowed to her mother, and Su Xiang looked at her daughter with black hair, snowy skin, and a graceful appearance. Thinking of the news she had just received, her smile grew stronger and stronger. "Ah you," she smiled, "did you know that the Crown Prince mentioned you when he asked the Empress Dowager his respects today?" Lin Yu was taken aback. "Did you mention her?" She looked surprised and said, "What did you mention about your daughter?" The Crown Prince said that she had heard of the beautiful appearance and good moral character of Lady Lin, and the Empress Dowager wanted to invite you into the palace to see you. Now that the position of the Crown Princess is vacant. "Ayu, do you understand?" Su Xiang kindly reached out and trimmed her hair, which was actually not messy. Looking at her, her eyes were so full of satisfaction and enthusiasm. "Tomorrow, you must remember to dress up well." Lin Yu was stunned. She was not surprised to see the Empress Dowager in the palace. After rebirth, this matter cannot be avoided in every lifetime, but how could the Crown Prince have mentioned her in the past few lifetimes? When her mother mentioned the hairpin ceremony, the Empress Dowager brought her an imperial gift and asked her to pay her respects and thank her personally. Then, of course, the Crown Prince was also deceived by the Empress Dowager for other reasons, and thus completed a blind date that both sides had agreed to. What's going on here? Why does the Crown Prince's actions differ from those of previous generations? Lin Yu couldn't help but feel an ominous premonition when something that was originally planned to happen suddenly changed. But Su Xiang continued, "You must thank the Empress Dowager and His Highness the Crown Prince well for entering the palace this time." Lin Yu became even more confused and said, "Why?" The Crown Prince inexplicably suddenly praised her in front of the Empress Dowager. What does she want to thank? Thank him for showing her parents the hope of her entering the Eastern Palace. Su Xiang said disgustedly, "It's not just those mediocre people." After the imperial court crossed south and abandoned the north, the southern scholars disdainfully referred to the northerners as poor people, meaning rough rural people. Recently, there have been tens of thousands of rebellious armies on the side of the commoners, known as the Praying Arm Army. First, they occupied the mountains as kings, coercing refugees, and later divided several cities, causing disaster. They also spread nonsense, saying that all noble families in the world can be killed except for the women of the Lin family. Lin Yu. In the past few lifetimes. Did you hear this news? It is said that the leader of the chaotic army is a madman born from a humble family. How unreasonable. If it weren't for the Crown Prince and Empress Dowager's words to uphold it, the reputation of the Lin family in Nanyang would have been tarnished and corrupted by him. Lin Yu. In the past few lifetimes. Was there such a person? Just as she was in a state of uncertainty due to these completely different news from her previous life, Su Xiangyue became even more indignant and said, "That madman used to be just a small civil servant in Jinchang County, under our jurisdiction in Nanyang. He really doesn't know the superiority and inferiority of heaven and earth." Jinchang County. This place name, which she had deliberately avoided for 2 lifetimes, suddenly appeared again, causing Lin Yu's heart to jump. Jinchang County official. Does this praying mantis armed army have anything to do with him? Seeing that her expression was not good, Su Xiang quickly stopped and comforted, "Don't be afraid, Au. That bastard wants to tarnish the reputation of the Lin family. The Empress Dowager also comes from the Lin family, how could she sit idly by? When you marry the crown prince and become the crown princess in the future, who dares to chew on this kind of tongue?" Lin Yu forced a smile. Unexpectedly hearing news related to him, Lin Yu forgot how he perfunctorily handled his mother's promise to enter the palace tomorrow and how he returned to his room. Even the news of Li Ying was not revealed. She sat down in front of the embroidery table, looking at the blank embroidery shed. Her mind was dizzy and her heart was in turmoil. Suddenly, she remembered that in the first life, she had embroidered a whale on this blank handkerchief and finally gave it to him. How can anyone embroider whales these days? In my first life, I always cling to these small differences from the times, and because of these careful thoughts that only I understand, I secretly feel happy. Chen Xiai. She thought she had already forgotten about him. In 2 lifetimes, she sometimes looked back and realized that she had been separated from him for too long. But when his name reappeared uncontrollably in his heart, the pain of his first death seemed to make a comeback. Lin Yu covered his lips and suddenly felt a piercing pain. His throat was sweet, and he suddenly spurted out a mouthful of blood. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Wealth of Previous Lives. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3 Wealth of Previous Lives by Lu saw her suddenly collapse on the embroidered table, covering her chest. Blood flowed from her greasy fingertips, staining her collar red and her face turning pale with fear. "Miss, what's wrong with you? Hurry up. Go tell madam. Go get a doctor." The other maids panicked and took orders. Upon hearing Bai Lu's voice, Lin Yu's pain became even more difficult to suppress. Second, why did she choose to adapt to this era and become a good pawn in the family, a good daughter in the eyes of her parents? Isn't it because the fate of the first life was bleak? Be gentle and obedient, and endure adversity. She thought that this way, she could survive and live very well. But how ridiculous it is. Whether she resisted or obeyed, she died a tragic death. At this moment, Su Xiang hurriedly arrived and saw that she had vomited blood. She quickly asked Bai Lu to help her rest on the bed. Lin Yu was in the inner room and heard the maid beside her mother shouting loudly, "Miss, did you eat anything unclean today? Is that how you are serving her? Do you want to be beaten to death by the cellar?" Su Xiang spoke impatiently, how could it be that at this moment? Don't be an unlucky person who will delay entering the palace tomorrow. They only breathed a sigh of relief when the doctor arrived and gave a strange expression after diagnosing their pulse, saying, "Worry too much, it's okay. Bai Lu doesn't understand why she vomited blood, but it can be considered okay." She said cautiously, "Madam, how about? Let the young lady rest at home for a few days." Su Xiang glanced at her and said coldly, "The doctor said that Au is not a big deal anymore. Do you, a servant, understand more than the doctor?" Bai Lu dare not say more. Before they left, Su Xiangfen instructed her, "Tomorrow, dress up the young lady well and don't show any signs of illness, which will displease the nobles." After speaking, she looked at Bai Lu pickily again and said, "As for you, dress more plainly. A maid, don't dress so ostentatiously." Bai Lu lowered her head and said softly, "Yes." When she turned back into the room, Lin Yu was staring out the window and lost in thought. Bai Lu hesitated for a moment and pretended to be calm as she stepped forward to tuck in her blanket. She gently said, "Miss, aren't you still resting?" Lin Yu turned his head and looked at her for a moment before whispering, "In a while, I'll find a reason to ask my mother to take your promissory note and return it to you. You'll be good people, and even if something happens to me in the future, you don't have to be implicated. If my mother refuses, I can always get this done when I get married, but please wait a little longer. Bai Lu's heart trembled as she said in a trembling voice, Miss, there's no need for that. I know, I know. Lin Yu comforted her with a smile. Due to her weakness, her lips appeared pale and her whole body seemed to shatter at a touch. In this world, there is no real freedom. But at least, having a little more choice is also good, right? After thinking about it all night, when Lin Yu woke up the next day, his expression was haggard, his face was devoid of blood, his eyes were red and swollen, and his eyes were visibly black and blue. No matter how Bai Lu dressed her up, when her parents saw her, their faces darkened. Although Lin Yu's father Lin Yan and the Empress Dowager share the same surname Lin, they are not actually the same clan. However, the Empress Dowager became the Empress Dowager, and both sides were willing to associate with this relative, thus becoming their own family. Lin Yan was a foreign minister and it was not convenient for him to enter and exit the harem. After becoming a relative of the Empress Dowager, he began to visit her frequently with his wife in order to strengthen his plastic relationship. He glanced at his daughter and then at her maid, saying in frustration, why is this maid also looking disheartened? She's dressed so dimly that others might think that our Lin family can't afford to buy the fabric for her. Su Xiang didn't mention yesterday's dim request for Bai Lu to wear. So, do you want them to change clothes again? Lin Yan said irritably, forget it, make some fuss. If we miss the time, it will be even worse. Speaking of this, he gave Lin Yu a displeased look and scolded, didn't your mother tell you she was going to see the crown prince today? It's such an important matter, you're lucky to make yourself look like this. He spoke rudely, and Lin Yu's face immediately frosted. Make yourself look like this. Is it within my control to vomit blood? Every time he is reborn, Lin Yu has died once, and his temper is not very good. There is great terror in life and death. She has experienced it 3 times, and although there are still many things that can make her afraid in this world, being angry with her parents is definitely not one of them. She served as the crown princess for so many years, and later became the queen of the northern Rong king on the grassland. Her father once wanted to kneel down to her as a vassal, and her mother is now the main mother of the Lin family, why hasn't she ever been the queen of the 2 countries? Seeing them as parents, giving them some face in filial piety, if they speak well and are polite, she won't be able to speak coldly. But if you think you can easily give her a look, don't think she will swallow her anger. Lin Yu simply put on a tone of annoyance and said, since the Empress Dowager and His Highness want to see me, shouldn't I be able to see people? It's not that I've ruined my appearance, why is it worth such disdain? Besides, I know how to dress, so I won't make a fool of myself. Dad is a man, how do you know how to match girls' clothes? Seeing her strong tone of defiance, Lin Yan was shocked and said, ah you. Although I am a man and don't understand how to match girls' clothes, the crown prince is also a man. Lin Yu smiled faintly and said, Dad thinks that His Highness the Crown Prince is the same as Dad. I dare not say that. Lin Yan choked for a moment and changed his voice, you never thought about how disheartened you look. If the Empress Dowager and the Crown Prince think you have resentment, think that the Lin family doesn't like the Eastern Palace, doesn't want to marry the Crown Prince, and thinks that the Lin family is disrespectful to the royal family, wouldn't you implicate the entire family? Why can't you fall for it? Lin Yu sneered and said, don't use your family to kidnap me so easily. If I can't marry the Crown Prince, the Lin family will decline, and the books of your older brothers will be in vain. Are these, pillars of the Lin family, too useless? After finishing speaking, she was too lazy to argue any more and bowed expressionlessly. Without waiting for her parents' consent, she took Bai Lu straight onto the carriage. Bai Lu panicked and said, Miss, Mississippi. Don't be afraid, Lin Yu patted her arm lightly as he saw her face full of fear. They still have something they can use for me, they won't do anything to us. Before, she didn't understand. And didn't want to understand. The laws that operate in this world, she just resisted everything. After the tempering of the second and third generations, Lin Yu dared to say that he was familiar with the game rules of this world. She understands how much freedom she has, knows the bottom line of her actions and the scale she can offend, knows the geometry of the chips she can trade with others, and knows where her value lies. Lin Yu knew that if the result of this visit to the palace did not satisfy his parents, they would definitely discipline themselves severely after returning. However, she had already seen through that being obedient was just an insignificant addition. As long as she could benefit her family enough, even if she wasn't so obedient, her parents wouldn't care. Lin Yu also thought that if she was gentle and obedient enough to please her parents, they would consider her happiness even more. But sometimes, obedience may not necessarily lead to genuine love, and it may even make people more indifferent. It's better to have some edges, cry, make a scene, and throw a tantrum. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Brilliant Ex-Husband. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Brilliant Ex-Husband by Lu felt the calm and confident confidence with ease. She suddenly realized that the young lady had an aura that was no less impressive than the old lady, and even surpassed her head. Lin Yu told her not to be afraid. She suddenly became less afraid of following the young lady's disobedience to the old lady. Su Xiang and Lin Yan did not immediately get angry. They were disobeyed by their daughter for the first time and stood outside in anger for a while. After a moment, Lin Yan glared at his wife fiercely and said, "Look at the good daughter you taught. You really have your own opinions. I got on the carriage myself first." Su Xiang sighed and dared not refute, silently following her husband onto the carriage, and then the two carriages drove towards the palace together. On the way, Lin Yu looked at Bai Lu sitting next to him and thought to himself, "My fate is unpredictable, but in these few lifetimes, for you, going to the crown prince's side may be the best fate. But Lu, I'm sorry, I can't marry myself just to please you and him." When the carriage arrived at the palace, Lin Yan and Su Xiang got off the carriage first. Lin Yu was supported by Bai Lu and had just lifted the door curtain when he heard his parents' slightly frightened salute outside. "See Your Highness the Crown Prince." "Prince." "Your Highness." She hesitated slightly, looked up, and indeed saw a carriage not far away, as if it had been waiting for a long time. After seeing the appearance of the Lin family carriage, the person inside the carriage lifted the door curtain and, with the help of the old maidservants and young children beside them, slowly stepped out of the carriage with a slight limp. Under the sunshine, the person was dressed in a moon-white brocade robe, fresh and elegant, with dark lines on their clothes that were understated and simple. It is completely different from Lin Yu's preference for luxurious appearances with rich colors such as vermilion and purple. When everyone was kneeling and bowing down, he looked up and from afar, Lin Yu could see his face clearly. "My skin is still cold and white like snow, my long hair is still thick and black like ink, my appearance is still shining brightly, beautiful and handsome, shining like clouds and roses. But the originally aloof eyebrows and eyes are now incredibly gentle and elegant, with movements and stillness becoming more restrained. That face is not wrong with the current crown prince Zhu Rongzhan. But he is always accused of being beautiful, fond of fancy clothes, extravagant, frivolous in behavior, and irritable in temperament. How come everything we see so far is completely opposite? The simple carriage, elegant attire, and the beautiful maidservant, Jiaodong, who was serving beside her, were nowhere to be seen." In shock, Lin Yu met his eyes. That pair of lacquered black eyes, so clear and bright, were far from the memory of either smiling or uncertain, or bloodshot, chaotic and scattered appearance. Zhu Rongzhan looked at her with a calm expression and a polite faint smile between his eyebrows and eyes. But he was already charming with his eyebrows and eyes, and a three-part smile, which seemed very teasing. The young man stood in the same place, with a charming charm, so when he moved, his slightly limp appearance was like a white jade with blemishes, making people sigh pitifully. "Your Highness the Crown Prince, may I personally welcome you out of the palace gate and wait here." Since he fell off his horse and limped, he detested going out and refused to meet people. Could it be that he happened to pass by and happened to meet? Or does he still remember Bailu, his lover from the previous life, so he can't wait? Seeing only himself standing on the carriage, Lin Yu's heart tightened and he didn't have time to continue contemplating. He quickly got off the car with Bailu and knelt down with everyone. After a moment, the Crown Prince slowly approached. When the Crown Prince spoke and gently called them up, Lin Yu couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. She had become accustomed to staying on the grassland in her previous life, and although she still remembered the process of bowing, her knees were not accustomed to being in contact with the hard ground for so long. Bailu remembered that she had just vomited blood last night and quickly helped her up. When she stood up, her knees hurt and she stumbled slightly, falling into Bailu's arms and shaking her. The Crown Prince's gaze suddenly stabbed towards him like a sword. At that moment, Lin Yu seemed to have seen the man in his memory who had a special favor for Bailurong, and there was nothing wrong with him. She doesn't mind the Crown Prince not loving her, but falling in love with her maid. Anyway, she didn't love the Crown Prince either, but in the end, Zhu Rongzhan sacrificed her without hesitation, which still made her feel cold. She can understand his decision, but that doesn't mean she can accept it. At this moment, Zhu Rongzhan's gaze had softened, and the speed of the change in his gaze almost made Lin Yu feel that the slight coldness just now was just his illusion. He said gently, "Is this the lady of the Lin family?" "What's wrong, but she's not feeling well." The tone of discord made Lin Yu's hair stand on end. She was momentarily unsure how to deal with this extremely unfamiliar Crown Prince, and felt that perhaps his gentleness was towards Bailu. Thinking of this, Lin Yu found it absurd and ridiculous. She claims to be clear-headed and has read so many online articles before traveling. She never dreamed that one day she would also become the dumbest character in the story. The shield of the male protagonist's beloved. In her silence, Lin Yan saw the Crown Prince's active concern and couldn't help but explain with a joyful expression. "Thank you, Your Highness, for your concern. The young lady has already been diagnosed by a doctor and is not in any serious condition. It's just that she had a nightmare yesterday and was frightened. She's only feeling a little haggard today." "Nightmare?" Zhu Rongzhan frowned and said slowly, "What nightmare?" He gave a faint smile, his eyebrows and eyes relaxed, like the first blooming of spring crabapple. "Did the lady of the Lin family have a nightmare in front of this palace? But this palace looks too scary. However, it is well known that he looks like a good woman." Lin Yan showed respect, and even if it was a joke, he immediately knelt down to apologize. Lin Yu couldn't help but kneel down with his parents. But as soon as her knees bent, someone suddenly reached out and grabbed her arm, firmly supporting her. Lin Yu's heart trembled as he thought of her recent death. When she was caught by Tsang Tao outside the camp, he did the same and tightly grasped her wrist. The strong and powerful sense of confinement made her almost instinctively pull back her hand, her face uncontrollably showing a hint of fear. This reaction was somewhat excessive, and Zhu Rongzhan couldn't help but be slightly taken aback. He quickly withdrew his hand, but curled up his fingers tightly in his sleeve and clenched his fist. "Restraint," he told himself. "Be more restrained and take your time. Sorry, it's my palace's rudeness. It's just that the lady is feeling unwell, so don't kneel back and forth." After speaking, he looked at Lin Yan again with a cold expression and a heavier tone. "This palace is just a joke. Mr. Lin himself is young and strong, so why don't he care about his daughter? My daughter is not feeling well, and the adults don't worry at all. Instead, they look happy. What's the reason for this?" He seemed to be defending Lin Yu every word, but Lin Yu didn't think he was very important in his heart. Rather than saying he stopped her from kneeling, Lin Yu felt that there was a greater possibility that he would kneel with her to prevent Bailu from doing so. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Does God bless you? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Heavenly favor. Lin Yanshan smiled and stood up from the ground. Zhu Rongzhan stopped looking at him and instead instructed the maid beside him, go and invite the imperial physician to the Empress Dowager's palace. After speaking, Zhu Rongzhan looked at Lin Yu again. After a moment of silence, there seemed to be a surge of dark waves in his eyes. If the lady is not feeling well, then take the carriage from this palace to enter the palace. Lin Yu's heart sank. Why did the crown prince show such enthusiasm? This may seem thoughtful, but it is a hidden trap. That is the crown prince's chariot. After getting on the car, her relationship with the crown prince may not be able to be completely resolved. Absolutely not. In her spare time, she caught a glimpse of her parents beside her, who were momentarily taken aback. Immediately, a look of ecstasy appeared on her face, and she quickly lowered her head to refuse, "Thank you, Your Highness, for your concern." The little girl really just had a nightmare and was not sick. Really? Seeing her persist, Zhu Rongzhan couldn't force herself. He said with concern, "Don't feel embarrassed. If you have any discomfort, feel free to tell me." Lin Yu bowed his head to express gratitude and spoke firmly, "Thank you for your kindness, Your Highness. My daughter is indeed unharmed." Zhu Rongzhan remained speechless for a moment. He looked at the slender and fair neck that she had lowered her head, and pursed his lips. "Ayu!" He shouted in his heart with a heavy voice. "My Ayu!" This is the first time they have met in their lives, and he told himself not to act too abruptly to avoid scaring her. But despite being her own wife and feeling unwell in front of her, she dared not truthfully tell herself and could not touch, comfort, or take care of herself. Zhu Rongzhan clenched his back teeth, only feeling angry in his heart. Ayu is not feeling well, her face is so bad. Lin Shi and these people, are they blind? But in the previous life, did Ayu also fall ill when he first met him? At that time, he only knew that the Empress Dowager favored the lady of the Lin family, while the Empress Dowager favored the lady of the Luo family. He didn't like anyone and didn't care about anyone. Everyone was very annoyed, only thinking that the lady of the Lin family was beautiful and the lady of the Luo family was not ugly. I don't even remember the scene when we first met now. Zhu Rongzhan couldn't help but feel a bit regretful. If Ayu had fallen ill the first time she saw him, how uncomfortable would she have been at that time? Zhu Rongzhan restrained the impulse to hold her in his arms and had no choice but to board the carriage on his own, while Lin could not cross him and walk ahead, only following behind his carriage. He looked out the car window, knowing that she was within reach, but couldn't see each other, feeling full of anger. Nightmares. He wanted to ask her, what kind of nightmare did she have and how could she be so scared? After getting married, he will stay by her side every night, no matter what nightmare she has, she doesn't have to be afraid. I don't know just now, did Ayu see his face clearly? She always lowers her head and doesn't dare to look at him, making him very anxious. Zhu Rongzhan couldn't help but reach out and touch his face. In the past, he never cared about his appearance. After all, as a crown prince, if someone praises his skin bag, it only indicates that his quality is too mediocre. But now Ayu once said, she thinks I'm good looking and likes my face. In the already dilapidated and desolate courtyard, a young man with disheveled clothes and disheveled hair leaned against a pillar, sitting on the ground with a dustpan, full of alcohol, and laughing wildly but desolate. He has a beautiful appearance, even though he is still very young, his temples have already grown white hair, and he looks disheveled and disheveled. Someone approached quietly and took his wine jar. Your Highness cannot drink anymore. Your Highness. I am no longer a Your Highness. Deposed as a commoner, don't you understand? A commoner. Rongzhan, being able to live is already great. Alive. Zhu Rongzhan looked at his wife, his eyes bloodshot. Oh, I was born as the crown prince. I should have been the master of this world. But now, I don't even have a brocade robe, I can't even taste a bowl of honey water. Is that also good? Very good. Lin Yu remained calm and composed, with a soft tone. Your Highness has a beautiful appearance, dressed in a simple robe, which actually looks even more colorful and beautiful than before. Zhu Rongzhan felt an indescribable absurdity, and he fixed his gaze on her for a moment, only to find that she had not lied. There was no sympathy or pity in her expression, and she remained as dignified and self-disciplined as when he was the crown prince and she was the crown princess, without any change in his identity. Perhaps it was because consistency was too rare. Zhu Rongzhan calmed down a bit. After a moment of silence, he hissed and asked, "Everyone has left. Why don't you take the divorce notice?" Lin Yu rearranged his open collar and then remained silent for a moment. "I don't want to leave," she said. "Let's go down together, okay? Today the sunshine is so bright, I just got so close to her, and I said many things to her. She must be able to see clearly, and then, like in her previous life, please me again and like me. I loved her earlier, and she could also love me earlier." Thinking of this, Zhu Rongzhan's lips couldn't help but rise, but he also thought of the ending of his previous life. In his heart, he fiercely gripped the waist ring, with such great strength that he even crushed the white jade. In this life, he will never let anyone take her away from him again. He will give her a lifetime of glory and favor, and he will stand shoulder to shoulder with her in the world. 1. Set and meet. When Zhu Rongzhan arrived at the Empress Dowager's palace, he unconsciously searched for Lin Yu as soon as he got off the car. But she saw her tightly leaning against her own maid, following behind her father, lowering her head, unable to see the expression on her face clearly. Lin Yu is quietly trying to inquire about the crown prince's situation. She said to her mother, "I didn't expect the crown prince to be so gentle." My mother couldn't help but exclaim, "Yes, it seems that the rumors are true." Rumors? What rumors? Su Xiang glanced at her husband and saw that he didn't stop her. She whispered to her daughter, "Your Highness the Crown Prince used to have a violent temperament, and he also avoided leg diseases. He was sensitive and suspicious, and even deliberately retaliated against his advisors who accused him of the emperor." "Yeah. It's this art style that's right." Lin Yan interjected at this moment, "It's normal for a young person to have a bit of a temper. Some people privately say that the crown prince doesn't look like a human king." "Ah, you don't believe it, those are all nonsense from disrespectful people." Lin Yu skipped his nonsense and said, "But today, it seems that His Highness the Crown Prince is not as rumored." "So there are rumors that..." Su Xiang said, "Our ancestors have appeared." Lin Yu was stunned and said, "What?" "It is said that a few days ago, His Royal Highness the Crown Prince dreamed of His Majesty Taizu and listened to Taizu's teachings in his dream. He suddenly realized and deeply regretted his previous stubbornness and arrogance, letting go of his father's hard work and cultivation. He was determined to reform himself. Since then, not only has he swept away his previous arrogance and treated virtuous officials with respect, but he has also cut off the trend of extravagance. Everything has been simplified, and even the servants he served have changed from beauties to mediocre ones. Many of them are lonely and helpless old maids, as well as disabled people with no other way of life. Your Majesty and the Empress are greatly pleased by this Lin Yu. She took a deep breath and forced a smile, saying, "I see. It's clear that heaven has blessed her." End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Looking for the benefits, what if it's traveling or reading? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Looking for the benefits, what if it's traveling or reading? Calm down. She told herself, "Lin Yu, you need to remain calm. Looking at the benefits, it doesn't necessarily mean rebirth. What if it's traveling or reading? Since she can travel back and be reborn 3 times, then this world is actually a book, and it doesn't seem unacceptable. I just don't know who the male and female protagonists are in this book. Is she a supporting role? Long Tao or cannon fodder? What is the positioning of the role of the crown prince? Does he want to turn over to the supporting role and climb to the top, or does he want to counterattack with cannon fodder? If traveling, what is the identity of the person wearing it? Ordinary male college students. A diligent and hard-working worker. A successful businessman with a deep understanding of the city. What does he want to do? Unify the world, climb the technological tree, carry out industrial revolution, develop sea routes, colonize the world. Okay. Even if we take 10,000 steps back, if it were a rebirth, which life was it before he was reborn? Is it the time when she married him to become the crown princess, or the time when she married the prince of Beirong? Lin Yu felt like her head was as big as a bucket. She was already feeling low on energy today, and now she frequently needs to use her fingertips to massage her temples to relieve anxiety. Is it possible for one to unite the front and support each other as a traveler together? If it were a storyteller, would it be possible for her to plot some plot so that she could know her own fate? Wait, if it's through reading, is there any mention of her time travel and rebirth in the book? Does the crown prince know? Lin Yu tossed and turned the brief meeting in his mind. Does your highness the crown prince have any abnormalities? What's going on? Everywhere is abnormal. It's outrageous. Just as she lowered her eyes and rubbed her forehead vigorously, Lin Yu suddenly heard Zhu Rongzhan's voice again. She was startled and looked up to find that he had walked to her side at some point. Zhu Rongzhan looked worried and said, "What's wrong? Does your head hurt too?" But the more gentle and considerate he was, the more cautious Lin Yu became. Maybe it was because he didn't sleep well last night, so. The lady's physique seems to be a bit weak, Zhu Rongzhan said with concern. There happen to be a few ginseng sticks in the Dongdong mansion treasury, maybe the lady can use them. Lin Yu hurriedly said, "There's no need to. Don't refuse. If it weren't for this palace and the Empress Dowager, the lady would have been able to rest well at home today." Zhu Rongzhan smiled apologetically and said, "I'm really sorry. If I had known that the lady's body was unwell, I wouldn't have let Lord Lin take you into the palace today." Lin Yu's heart trembled wildly. Zhu Rongzhan met her for the first time in this life, but he was already in close contact with the second emperor before he planned to push her to death. He wouldn't have planned how to use her to death from the beginning of this world, right? She couldn't help but feel a movement in her heart, opening her mouth to speak. Hydrogen, helium, lithium, beryllium, boron. Compatriots, fellow villagers or not. Travel through time and books, you can do it. Tell me, you're not me. If it is really rebirth, the situation will be very bad at this moment. A maid walked out of the hall and respectfully bowed to Zhu Rongzhan, interrupting their conversation. "I have seen His Highness the Crown Prince." Her appearance was like a reminder to Zhu Rongzhan, to pay attention to the joy and tenderness of looking at Lin Yu between his eyebrows and eyes, not to be too overflowing, and to arouse suspicion. His expression paused, and he slightly restrained his joy. When he turned his face to speak to the palace maid, his expression was already as usual. "Get up." The maid said cautiously, "Your Highness, the Empress Dowager has ordered me to come and deliver a message to Lady Lin, saying that the doctor is already waiting in the side hall. The Empress Dowager's mother has asked the lady to go and take a look quickly, don't delay." Lin Yu had to hold back his words and hesitated to speak. Zhu Rongzhan said thoughtfully, "This palace is not good for walking. Ladies can be at their own discretion and there is no need to worry." Upon hearing this, Lin Yan and his wife, as well as the maidservants and others, all felt a sudden surge in their hearts. Although the crown prince has been awakened for some time now, the terrifying impression that he would become furious when he heard others say words like legs, running, jumping, etc. has not yet dissipated from people's minds. At this moment, seeing him mention it as if nothing had happened, everyone instinctively felt shocked. It was evident that his expression was peaceful, and he couldn't help but think to himself. It seems that the Emperor Taizu really appeared, which relieved His Highness. Lin Yu glanced at Zhu Rongzhan, hesitated for a moment, and finally pleaded guilty first. Thinking of her restless gaze, Zhu Rongzhan remained calm and composed on his face, but his heart was filled with anxiety, like 100 claws scratching his heart. What did Yu just want to say to me? She always sneaks her eyes up from time to time, peeking at my face. Her gaze at me is so affectionate. Is she already attracted to this palace? Thinking of this, the smile on Zhu Rongzhan's face, which was 3 parts high, suddenly expanded uncontrollably to 10. The Empress Dowager is really amazing. Why can't we wait for Yu to finish speaking before calling her over? No, Yu was already feeling unwell and had a headache just now. It's really better not to procrastinate anymore. Damn it, Yu went to the side hall, but he couldn't go with him. There is only Lin Yan's annoying old face in the main hall. It's really boring. How long will it take to see Yu again? He wants to ask her now, what she wants to say to him. Then I want to sit with her and talk all afternoon, all my life. No one is allowed to disturb me. Zhu Rongzhan stood in place, reluctant to part with Lin Yu's distant figure. It wasn't until he walked around the corner that his expression faded. He turned around and walked towards the main hall of the Empress Dowager's bedroom. Lin Yu is not only worried about Zhu Rongzhan's bewildering attitude, but also about his own body. She is worried that the damage caused by death in previous lifetimes may accumulate into this life. When she was just reborn, she felt a faint pain all over her body, which can be said to be the residual psychological effect of her recent death. But why did he suddenly vomit blood like when he was poisoned in the first life? The experience of being reborn through time is already very rare. She has been reborn 3 times, and it is impossible for her to be reborn indefinitely. Will it become weaker and weaker over time, and if we die again, one day we will probably never be able to start over again. However, medicine in the 21st century may not be able to detect the difficulties of past and present lives, let alone ordinary ancient doctors. Even the medical staff of the Imperial Hospital, after repeatedly examining their pulse, can only come to the conclusion that excessive worry and rest are advisable. He painlessly wrote a few gentle prescriptions, and it is estimated that he will have to complain in his heart that a noble person is really delicate and has many things to do. Lin Yu glanced at the prescription, which was full of various precious medicinal herbs. Ginseng and deer antler seemed to be free, and if they didn't die, they would die. She furrowed her brow, feeling that the doctor was just playing around and saying, "But I suddenly vomited blood last night." As soon as these words were spoken, Bai Lu beside her secretly let out a bad cry in her heart, but it was too late to stop her. Just now, Lin Yan told the Crown Prince that Lin Yu was not in any serious trouble, only had a nightmare and did not mention vomiting blood. Since this doctor was summoned by the Crown Prince, he will definitely go to report the results to the 2 nobles later. When the 2 sides say different things, wouldn't it make the Lord embarrassed? She sighed in her heart. Mrs. Thinking is still not thorough enough. But Lin Yu has other plans. Although the incident of vomiting blood last night made her a bit worried, she will make full use of everything she can. From the meeting with Zhu Rongzhan just now, although it is uncertain what his situation is, he can no longer be treated as a neutral unit as before. If he has a tendency to choose her as the crown princess and wants to change this marriage, it will be much harder. It's better to use the condition of poor health to delay immediately. After all, a royal daughter.in.law should prioritize her offspring. If the crown princess is physically weak, how will she give birth to an heir in the future? How to mother the world? The Empress Dowager should think more for a while. The Empress Dowager's desire for power is not heavy, nor is she deliberately going to confront the Empress. After all, she is the mother of the current emperor and has a strong voice, so there is no need to compete with her daughter.in.law for power. Lin Yan wanted to marry his daughter to the crown prince, but she just felt it was feasible and decided to do it. If Lin Yu is not suitable, she will not force it. After all, during Lin Yu's reign as the crown princess, the Empress Dowager was also very kind to the Luo family's daughter, and even offered more compensation. On the contrary, after the Empress Dowager's death, the Empress directly expressed her dissatisfaction with Lin Yu. At that time, the relationship between the Crown Prince and the Emperor became increasingly tense. The Empress summoned her into the palace every few days and scolded her for not fulfilling her duty as a virtuous wife. She could not advise the Crown Prince to correct his bad habits and improve his character. Every time, Lin Yu had to kneel in front of her and listen to her constantly threatening, "If you are not virtuous enough, you will be deposed. If you are not virtuous enough, and you will be looking for a virtuous wife for the Crown Prince." Lin Yu could only be submissive on the surface, but cursed his mother in his heart. Damn it! Is it none of her business to teach her son well on her own? Not to mention anything else, it's just the mother-in-law daughter-in-law relationship. Although the true identity of the Crown Prince is now uncertain, Lin Yu has decided that whether it is through time travel, through books, or rebirth, she will never become a Crown Princess again in this lifetime. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Never Abandon. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Never abandon. Upon hearing that she had even vomited blood, the doctor was taken aback and immediately said, "Why didn't the lady say so earlier?" After carefully examining the pulse for a while and adding a few prescriptions, when Bai Lu asked what the disease was, he couldn't explain it clearly. As he left, Bai Lu frowned and said, "It is said that the imperial physicians in the palace have the most profound medical skills in the world, but I don't think so. Their ancestors must have produced famous doctors, and the family has passed down like this. However, the most important thing in learning medicine is experience. They only treat the nobles' illnesses, and in the end, they can only preach from the books left by their ancestors." Lin Yu was quite amused, and she smiled and said, "It's my fault for not following the diseases written in the books." Bai Lu couldn't help but laugh and said, "Miss, don't joke about your body." She turned to Worry and said, "What if there really is something difficult and complicated that they can't see? What should we do?" Lin Yu sighed, "Let's take a look again. I've only vomited once now, maybe it won't happen again in the future, and I'll be fine." Bai Lu properly collected the prescription and remained worried, saying, "I hope so." The two of them stood up and went to the main hall. When they arrived, they happened to encounter a doctor coming out of the main hall, who should have gone to report Lin Yu's condition. As soon as they entered, they saw the Empress Dowager sitting upright in the main seat, accompanied by Zhu Rongzhan. There was a hint of sympathy and concern on the Empress Dowager's face, and Zhu Rongzhan furrowed his brows slightly. Lin Yan and Su Xiang, who were sitting at the bottom, looked slightly uneasy. Lin Yu bowed to the Empress Dowager and the Crown Prince. Although he was very tired of these complicated rules in his heart, he had a smile on his face, making it hard to see any reluctance. The Empress Dowager kindly said, "Good child, sit down quickly. If you're feeling unwell, you still need to rest well." She said, "Sit down quickly," but Lin Yu still had to behave properly and thank her a favor before sitting down next to her mother. The Empress Dowager looked at her carefully and saw that her face was indeed pale and powerless. She couldn't help but feel a little regretful in her heart. Alas, it's a pity. This looks excellent and belongs to the same family, but unfortunately the body is not good enough. I heard that I even vomited blood last night. The last time Lady Luo entered the palace, she was full of energy, with her eyebrows and eyes full of hope, indicating that she was capable of giving birth and nurturing. The royal daughter-in-law still prioritizes having children. If the Crown Prince really likes it and looks beautiful, she can be accepted as a concubine. Thinking of this, she turned her head to look at the Crown Prince, only to see Zhu Rongzhan staring straight at Lin Yu, clutching the armrest as if this was the way to secure herself in her seat, otherwise she would fly to the girl's side the next moment. Empress Dowager. What's going on? Didn't you know each other before? Zhu Rongzhan worried and said, "Why did you even vomit blood?" He furrowed his brow and glanced at Lin Yan with a cold, icy gaze. Didn't it mean he only had nightmares? How could it be so serious? Lin Yanhan came out and was not surprised to see her father being questioned like this. She had already anticipated this scene and calmly explained, "It's my daughter's fault. It's because I'm afraid my parents are worried, so when they came to visit, they didn't tell their parents." Lin Yu has a distant relationship with his parents, but as both members of the Lin family, they are always regarded as one entity outside. Moreover, nowadays, filial piety is highly valued, and if a daughter sits idly by while her father is trapped and humiliated, she will also be mistaken in the eyes of others. She not only mentioned her own physical weakness, but also gave her father a step forward, and this matter was considered to have settled peacefully. Lin Yan breathed a sigh of relief and said, "It's like this." He turned his head to condemn Lin Yu with relief and said, "You child, how can you hide and not report any major health issues?" Lin Yu followed the performance and said, "I was thinking of entering the palace the next day, and both my parents considered it a top priority. How could I disturb the arrangements because of my little daughter? Besides, the doctor said it was okay after seeing it, so I thought it was probably nothing." Watching her explain one by one with low eyebrows and pleasing eyes, Zhu Rongzhan almost laughed back in anger. Does she think he can't see that she's covering up for her father? Perhaps Lin Yan knew she had vomited blood, but he didn't take it seriously at all. Lin's lack of attention to her shows that Au and Lin were not on the same path from the beginning. In the previous generation, the Lin family would send people to contact the crown princess every once in a while, either to arrange for this clan member to become an official or to promote that clan member to higher positions. This is a common occurrence, otherwise those families would have gone to great lengths to stuff their daughters into his backyard for what? Is he limping? Does he have a hot temper? Picture his face. Not yet for his position as heir apparent. His power in the Eastern Palace. Except for the low-ranking attendants, Liang Di, Liang Yuan, Zhao Sun. None of them have ever spoken to him for their family members. Even talented people dare to muster the courage to act coquettishly. Only the crown princess. I have never seen him before, how do I know his talent? If I don't know his talent, how dare I recommend him as an official? The article he wrote is nonsensical, so why do you want to open your mouth and demand an official position for him? If he were a local official, the local people would be afraid of suffering, so I wouldn't recommend him. I have never served as an official in a court before. When it comes to family and state affairs, the emperor and the crown prince have their own considerations. I don't understand, how can I intervene rashly? She repeatedly refused, forcing her clan members to ignore her status as the crown princess, naming and cursing loudly, Lin Yu. If you weren't a daughter of the Lin family, why would you become the crown princess? Now you refuse to help your fellow clan even once, so heartless. How could you know that you haven't begged us for a day in the future? There are enough people who have planned for the Lin family, and I am not lacking in one. Lin Yu said calmly, the crown prince is not the crown prince of the noble family. The crown prince is the crown prince of the people of the world. I am the crown princess, so I must stand with the crown prince. If I am not wise enough or talented enough, I cannot protect the people of the whole country. Why should I hold a high position? If the people are greedy and reckless, I should take it for granted and not be afraid of being punished by heaven. What did he think at that time? It seems that the crown princess in this palace is worthy of the word virtuous. At that time, his heart trembled, but on the surface, she sneered at the left and right, I don't know how long she will be foolish. Surprisingly, she pushed her family further and further away, resisting the gentry and standing with the common people. But when everyone wanted to benefit from him, only the crown princess said, I stand with the crown prince. Due to her impartiality, Zhu Rongzhan did not show it on his face, but a hint of respect grew in his heart. But at that time, he felt that she was too virtuous and dignified, not cute enough, boring, so he kept a respectful distance from her. Except for the days when it was stipulated by etiquette that he must stay overnight with the crown princess, he was unwilling to go find her at any other time. Recalling his own foolishness and ignorance back then, Zhu Rongzhan wanted to give himself a punch. But it's okay, it's going to happen soon. Wait a little longer, soon he will propose marriage to the Lin family. At that time, she will become his wife again. If she doesn't want to pay attention to Lin, he will make him never bother her again. He will never betray her again. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Different Choices. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Different Choices. Zhu Rongzhan said, I see. He sighed and said, the lady of the Lin family is truly pure filial. The Empress Dowager glanced at him with a smile in her heart. She couldn't help but ask, did Lady Lin of the Lin family know Rongzhan before? Lin Yu's heart tightened and he shook his head in a state of panic and confusion. Zhu Rongzhan smiled and said, this palace has no such honor. Oh, the Empress Dowager joked, are you all honored to use it? Su Xiang quickly teased and said, the graceful posture of a willow tree, how dare I bear such praise? It should be my daughter who has no such honor. Lin Yu gave a shy and reserved smile, observing in silence. The last thing he wanted to admit in his heart was that Zhu Rongzhan had been reborn like her. After all, if he really never knew each other, why was he so passionate when we first met? If traveling, do you look very similar to his modern acquaintances? If he wears books, is he the character he likes? Just even if it's rebirth, even if it's a rebirth, even if it's to get close to Bailu, Bailu is now just a maid. If he wants Bailu to speak up directly, her parents won't stop him at all. Why bother asking her to join in? Do you think her shield is too useful, so you also plan to marry and use it in this lifetime? Or, perhaps he thought he wanted Lin Yu's maid, but refused to marry Lin Yu, which would embarrass her, the Lin family, and the Empress Dowager. So, in order to have the best of both worlds, he decided to marry her and then accept Bailu. As the crown prince, having 3 wives and 4 concubines is also common. This is too much, Zhu Rongzhan. Although Lin Yu remained silent, the meeting came to an end in an atmosphere of joy between the host and the guest. After the Lin couple left with their daughter, the Empress Dowager looked at Zhu Rongzhan sitting next to her, staring blankly at Lin Yu's back, as if all her souls had followed her out of the palace. She whispered, do you really like her? Zhu Rongzhan withdrew his gaze and spoke firmly, grandmother, I won't marry a child unless she does. On the way back, Su Xiang said happily, Ayu, I think the crown prince really likes you. Lin Yan also stroked his long beard, smiling silently, appearing very satisfied. Lin Yu smiled faintly and said, it can be seen that Lu is dressed very well. Su Xiang glanced at Bailu, and her dissatisfaction this morning had long been forgotten. She said, those around you are all empty. It's still you are naturally beautiful. Lin Yan smiled and said, it's thanks to Madam for giving birth to her daughter so beautifully and raising her so dignified. Lin Yu watched as they boasted about their business and whispered, Mom and Dad, won't you ask me how I feel about the crown prince? What if I don't like it? Lin Yan said, what nonsense are you talking about? Like it or not, as a girl, it's not embarrassing to say it every time. Su Xiangdao said, Your Highness, the crown prince, has a noble status. If you could become the Empress Dowager, it would be the best destination. After getting married, how could a wife not like her husband? Don't say such foolish things anymore. Lin Yu remained silent for a moment, then calmly threw a bomb and said, but I and the young master of the Li family are already in love. Li, what is Li? Which young master of the Li family? Young Master Li Ying. Lin Yan suddenly turned his head and glared at Su Xiang, only because his wife was responsible for everything in the backyard. If anything went wrong with his daughter, it must have been her poor upbringing. Su Xiang also exclaimed in surprise, What? Young Master Li of the Li family. When did you meet? Lin Yu lied without making a draft. Last year's Lunar New Year. On the Shangxi festival, unmarried men and women are free to go out and participate in the Fuxi festival by the water. Many men and women will go hiking in pairs and release paper kites. On that day, even the strictest mother would relax the ban. Su Xiang exclaimed urgently, "Why have you never heard of it before?" Lin Yu looked embarrassed and said, "Mr. Li has always been worried about his poor health, which has dragged me down. So although we have been communicating, it has always been emotional and not just polite. A few days ago, he told me that his health has improved a lot and he has seriously considered his future with me. He has already told his parents that he may come to propose marriage in the next few days. I have been waiting for him." Bai Lu was stunned upon hearing this. She thought to herself, she waited day and night by the young lady's side. "Young lady, have you met the young master of the Li family last year's Shangxi festival? Have you ever spoken? Have you communicated with me before? When? Isn't she in a dream?" Lin Yu held her hand and squeezed it with a slight force. She remained silent and lowered her head to cooperate with Lin Yu, so as not to let the lady see anything unusual from her expression. Upon hearing this, Lin Yan signaled to her not to say anything for now. He nervously looked around and saw that the nearby palace people were far away. Lin Yu's voice was not loud, so he felt at ease. However, he still had a stern face and said with a guilty heart, "Go back to the mansion first. If you have anything to do, go back to the mansion." As they returned to the carriage, Lin Yu looked at Bai Lu and knew that she was confused and puzzled. After thinking for a moment about how to explain to her, Lin Yu opened the door and said, "Alu, you just met His Highness the Crown Prince. What do you think? Do you like His Highness the Crown Prince?" Bai Lu's face turned pale with fear and she knelt down on the ground, saying, "Mississippi. I dare not have such thoughts." Lin Yu wanted to help her up, but Bai Lu lay on the ground and refused to die. Lin Yu said, "If you like the Crown Prince, I will plead with my mother to take you as my adopted daughter. If the Crown Prince also likes you, he will agree to marry you into the Eastern Palace as a daughter of the Lin family." In this way, Lin obtained a position as the head of the Eastern Palace, and the Eastern Palace obtained her beloved, which was a win-win situation. Bai Lu's face turned pale and she said, "Miss, I dare not, I really dare not. What a noble person is the Crown Prince, how dare I think?" Lin Yu shook his head and said, "How can we accurately say about emotions? I'm not going, I have to follow Mississippi." Lin Yu sighed, but no longer insisted. "Since you want to follow me, I'll tell you clearly that I'm planning to marry Mr. Li, the son of the parents." Lin Yu said, "You need to help me. If my mother asks you how I communicate with Li Ying, you can say that every time you go out, you help me submit to the Stargate Temple. The Xingmen Temple is the Taoist temple where Li Ying resides." Bai Lu looked at her in shock and confusion. "Miss, you and young Master Li, what the hell are you?" "Not yet." Lin Yu answered in his heart, but with a mysterious smile on his face, he just smiled silently. She ordered, after returning to the mansion later, "Your mother may ask why you didn't report this matter in a timely manner. Alu, you need to find a way to explain it. If this happens, I will become the main mother of the Li family. I can take your family over from the Lin family, and I can also return your family's contract of sale to you. How about that?" Bai Lu hesitated. Seeing this, Lin Yu was not surprised. She continued, "Of course, there is a risk to this matter. If you don't want to hide it from me, I can understand. But at that time, if my mother still wants to marry me into the Eastern Palace, anyone who knows I may have connections with Li Ying will probably be dealt with. You are my personal maid. What do you think of your future, Alu?" With both coercion and temptation, Bai Lu finally made up her mind, bit her lips tightly, and nodded. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Not yet recognized. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Not yet acquainted. Seeing her panicked and fearful appearance, Lin Yu thought to himself. If it were in her first life, she would learn this way of communication and understand that benefits are always more reliable than emotions. Perhaps no, the ending is probably not different. Although Bai Lu did betray her, it was just bringing the expected outcome forward. Even if she didn't report to her mother, her parents wouldn't have agreed to her marriage with Chen Ci in the end. Nowadays, scholars and commoners do not intermarry. She used to be unclear about the weight of this rule, thinking that as long as she fought to the end, she would always get what she wanted. She is too naive. After Bai Lu reported to her mother, what followed was house arrest, scolding, reprimanding, and punishment. Finally, Lin Yu was sent to a Taoist temple, drank a glass of poisoned wine, and completed the family's honor murder. Lin Yu felt betrayed, and of course, he was angry, resentful, and wished he had killed Bai Lu to vent his hatred. She regards Bai Lu as her most trusted friend, but she is the eyeliner of her mother to monitor whether the daughter is obedient and whether her behavior is out of line. Secondly, Lin Yu originally intended to replace her, but his mother did not agree. Since her last life, she has let out her energy and is unwilling to continue fighting, so she doesn't insist on anything. She obeyed her family's wishes and became the crown princess, but she never fell in love with the crown prince and the life as a crown princess. Lin Yu can only guarantee that he will get along with Zhu Rongzhan without any mistakes in etiquette, stay away from him, and treat each other as if they were guests. And having sex with a man you don't love is really a painful thing. She is less willing to be spoiled. According to the etiquette regulations, the crown prince must stay overnight at the crown princess's place for a few days each month. Lin Yu often uses sunflower water to come or refuses to leave completely. After so many times, Lin Yu woke up one day and found Bai Lu kneeling outside the hall. And my mother sent a private message saying that this was a good arrangement for her. Is it okay for her? Is it better for the Lin family? For Su's good. When Lin Yu is unwilling or unable to fulfill her mission, there will always be someone to replace her and dedicate themselves to it. She can still be capricious, but regardless of whether Bai Lu wishes or not, this maid has no choice. Lin Yu knew that it was probably because he refused to ask for favor from the crown prince for his mother's family, so his mother thought of continuing to follow the crown prince's sleeping side path through Bai Lu. This move worked. Even very well. Lin's children were finally able to secure an official position in the hands of His Highness the Crown Prince through Bai Lu's recommendation. The Crown Prince also showed exceptional favor towards her, and whenever Bai Lu spoke up, there was no exception. Although Bai Lu was more cautious and attentive in front of Lin Yu than before, and served her well, the Crown Prince did not allow her to lower her status and then serve others. She coldly watched the story of the domineering prince falling in love with a delicate maid, and was once filled with jealousy. It's not because of anything else, but because of the huge differences in their backgrounds. Why can the Crown Prince and Bai Lu be together, but she and Chen Ci cannot? Later, the Crown Prince was deposed and he was dismissed from the harem, leaving only Lin Yu and Bai Lu behind. Bai Lu said that if Lin Yu doesn't leave, she won't either. Finally, he was forcefully kicked out by Zhu Rongzhan. He doesn't want her to suffer with him. And Lin Yu stayed not because of any special feelings towards Zhu Rongzhan, but because of the thought of returning to the Lin mansion, receiving more ridicule and re-evaluation of value from the audience, and ultimately being sent to another man to familiarize herself with the environment and personnel. She felt very painful and exhausted. Anyway, after spending so much time with the Crown Prince, I am already familiar with him. Now he is alone, and the relationship between mother.in.law and daughter.in.law does not need to be maintained. There is no need to worry about social activities. When his wife is very idle, it is better to maintain the status quo and live together. Others are unaware of the situation and say that they have a deep affection for each other and a deep affection for each other. So later, when the emperor fell seriously ill and suspected that the deposed crown prince was plotting to usurp the throne. It is said that even after he was deposed, several court officials still had close ties with him. He sent her to the palace as a hostage to make people feel at ease. They thought he loved her very much. On the night of the second day, he rose up in rebellion. Lin Yu was ordered to be strangled with white silk by the enraged emperor. After her death, she did not know the ending of that era of Zhu Rongzhan. Did he succeed in his rebellion? Still failed. If successful, he will have great power and there is no need to hide Bai Lu from afar. He can bestow upon her the title of crown princess, and when he ascends to the throne and proclaims himself emperor, Bai Lu may even be able to hold her mother in awe of the world. Is that right? Has he already arranged everything for his beloved in his heart, and she is just a roadblock that always needs to be cleared and obstructed? In the third life, Lin Yu wanted to marry Beirong far away. She originally wanted Bai Lu to stay in Nanyang, but her mother did not agree. Bai Lu is not only her eyeliner, but also contains her heart to protect her daughter. If there is a crisis in Beirong, Bai Lu should protect her with life. At that time, Lin Yu had already figured it out. She was the eldest daughter of the Lin family in Nanyang, while Bai Lu was just a maid. Her family worked in the Lin family's estate, and they all depended on the Lin family to live. She is attentive in her service, caring about the cold and warmth, dedicated to her work, and Lin Yu is foolish and flattered. Because of her meticulous care, she is considered genuinely good to herself and treated as her unspoken best friend. How dare people treat her as a sister's? Moreover, Lin Yu, as the master, was also in charge, along with her mother Su Xiang. She is the master who holds the power of Bai Lu's life and death. In his first life, if there was a private meeting with Chen Xiai, Lin Yu might have had a chance to admit his mistake and reflect, while Bai Lu, as a maid, was likely to be angered by her mistress and either sold or executed in the end. How can Bai Lu dare to gamble? What qualifications does Lin Yu have to demand someone to spend their lives with him? If she could stay, she would have met a noble lover and had the chance to become a crown princess. If Zhu Rongzhan's rebellion succeeded later, she might have become a cautious and humble maid from now on, and become the empress of the matriarchal world. But her fate trajectory easily changed like this. The crown prince's beloved consort, who should have been honored with infinite favor, passed away early on the grassland. Born into a human being, the nobles only use her as a tool. Her body, emotions, life, and future are not taken seriously by anyone, and she has never been able to control herself. Lin Yu is also like this. At least, she still has some room for choice. Due to this little choice, she is actually happier than many people. In his past life, I don't know if it was because Zhu Rongzhan didn't meet his lover that led to the butterfly effect. Not long after Bai Lu died of illness, the grassland also received news. After the crown prince was deposed, he quickly died of illness. Whether she died of illness or rebelled, Lin Yu thought that this life had nothing to do with her. The Lin couple did not expect their daughter to lie or dare to lie on such matters of honor, so after returning to the mansion and questioning a little, they believed Lin Yu's words. Although Lin Yu doesn't know Li Ying, she has been reborn for several lifetimes and always knows things that she shouldn't have known in this lifetime. These can all become evidence of her close relationship with Li Ying. The crown prince is certainly noble, but it is not easy for the Li family to offend him. Moreover, there is no deviation in the 8 characters on both sides, and even a slight mistake may cause both sides to capsize. For a moment, Lin Yan felt a great headache, frowning and lost in thought. Seeing that her husband had no idea, Su Xiang sometimes complained to her daughter, "Why didn't you say it earlier?" At other times, she was completely disoriented, how could this be so good? Upon seeing this, Lin Yu remained silent for a long time before taking a step back and volunteered, "If my parents are really in a difficult situation, I'll go explain to Mr. Li and ask him not to propose marriage." Su Xiang turned her head to look at her husband, and the sadness in Lin Yan's eyebrows immediately faded. He said joyfully, okay, you write a letter." Lin Yu lowered his eyes and said, "My daughter wants to talk to him face. This." Seeing him hesitating, Lin Yu said, "I had a prior relationship with Prince Li. Now that we have broken our promise and only wrote one letter, he may find it difficult to accept. It's better to explain it clearly when we meet, and then there will be no further involvement in the future. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Fraudulent Marriage. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Fraudulent Marriage. Lin Yu pondered for a moment and finally said, "Okay, okay." He eagerly asked, "When are you going to talk to Liying? Or will you go in the afternoon?" Lin Yu probed, "Otherwise, if there is a decree in the palace and the Li family comes to propose marriage, it might be bad." Lin Yu nodded repeatedly and said, "Yes, yes, good, good. Then you will go this afternoon. Do you want to bring some people?" "This matter should not be made public," Lin Yu said. "I'll just take Lu with me and go like a daily trip." Upon receiving approval, Lin Yu bowed and walked away. After returning to his room, he said to Bai Lu, "Call a servant and go to Xingmen Temple to see if there are many carriages at the entrance. If there are, it is likely that there will be a gathering. Then he will find a food box and ask the kitchen to make some pastries to take with him." By the time we had lunch break, the servant had already returned to report that there were indeed many carriages parked outside the main gate of the Star Gate Temple, and a banquet was being held in the center of the temple. The pastry has also been prepared and carefully packed into the food box. Lin Yu changed into a lighter colored dress, with only a pearl hairpin on her bun, featuring a low key and inconspicuous style. She also wore a hat with a hanging veil that could cover her face. When I got on the carriage and headed towards Xingmen Temple, I didn't even flag the Lin family. In these days, always be careful to maintain your reputation and protect the honor of your family. There is no wrong. After arriving at Xingmen Temple, one could indeed see the hustle and bustle of carriages and horses outside the Taoist temple, which was supposed to be a peaceful place outside the world. Many aristocratic families and clans were bustling with carriages, and according to the instructions of Li's servants, they stopped at the planned positions. Looking at the flags on those carriages, almost half of the aristocratic families in the capital had arrived. Lin Yu asked the carriage to stop at a distance from the door, found a hidden place to hide for a while, and then ordered a servant to go and ask if a young master of the Lin family was here, saying that he was commissioned by his elders to search. That young master is a famous and absurd person in the Lin family. The major clans have great achievements and many children, so there will always be some promiscuous children. No family is uncommon. The servant was ordered to go, and after a while, he returned to report, "Miss, the gatekeeper in the temple said that Mr. Lin is not among the invitations, and no one can enter without an invitation letter." Lin Yu nodded and said to Bai Lu, "Take off your clothes and exchange them with me." Bai Lu was surprised and didn't know what she wanted to do, but she still followed the instructions and took off her blue coat. Lin Yu changed into her green dress and ordered, "Wait for me here. If anyone finds a carriage and asks, they will say it's a female family member here. I won't be able to provide their identity and name." Bai Lu nodded and said, "Yes." Seeing that Lin Yu had a clear plan, as if she had a plan in mind, Bai Lu, although a little nervous, still followed the arrangement and watched her put on a bamboo hat, pick up the food box, and get off the carriage. Lin Yu avoided the numerous front doors of the carriage and walked towards the back door, raising his hand to knock on the door. A Taoist-like gatekeeper poked his head out and carefully examined Lin Yu. He raised his eyebrows and asked, "What do you do?" Lin Yu pretended to be timid and said, "Greetings. A distinguished person came to my shop to order a box of dim sum. My parents were too busy to leave. They asked my daughter to deliver them. Datu has developed its business and already has a business of ordering and delivering meals. There is no identity that is less suspicious than a person delivering meals. Dim sum." The concierge did not doubt too much. He just hesitated. "Which child ordered it?" "It's a young master surnamed Lu." The Lu family was dependent on the Li family, and Lu Yao had always had a close relationship with Li Ying. Li Ying held gatherings and he would be present 3 out of 4 times, making him a notorious playboy who was ignorant and inexperienced. As the crown princess, Lin Yu heard many jokes about Lu Yao's embarrassing behavior at the party. She remembered a joke mentioning that it was during these days that Li Ying had hosted a banquet. Fortunately, although many things have changed, this banquet still exists. The gatekeeper indeed nodded, indicating that Lu Yao was indeed present this time. He reached out and said, "Then give me your things. The host is hosting a banquet, and no one is allowed to enter. Even when delivering meals, outsiders are not allowed to enter casually." Lin Yu naturally refused to miss this opportunity to slip in. She said, "The gathering of the nobles. I shouldn't have disturbed them, but..." When Lord Lu ordered the meal, he still hadn't paid the bill. She lowered her head as if embarrassed to speak, her voice tense and aggrieved. They said I had to personally deliver it to pay the bill. The small shop is operating at a small cost, and it's really difficult to afford so much credit." The gatekeeper was taken aback. The girl in front of her, although wearing a bamboo hat and unable to see her face clearly, should be a beauty based on her figure and demeanor. He remembered Lord Lu's promiscuous and frivolous personality, and couldn't help but feel that this was indeed something that Lu Yao could do. Or rather, some playboys like to do things that tease women from good families. If it were the girl lured by Lord Lu, he wouldn't ruin the fun of those young masters. This merchant woman is still openly delivering meals, and she may become a favored concubine of a young master overnight. That's not something he, as a small gatekeeper, can offend. He hesitated for a moment, his tone becoming more polite. "Excuse me, lady, please wait here for a moment. I'll go ask." Lin Yu nodded obediently. She waited patiently. In her past life on the grassland, she learned many catching techniques. Song Tao said she was too weak and worried about being hurt, so he personally taught her hand in hand. It's ridiculous to say that at that time she thought she had met Song Tao, just like Bai Lu had met Zhu Rongzhan. He may be the right person for her. No one will treat her as a stunt double or a shield anymore, but she truly likes Lin Yu. As a result, people in high positions are foolish who trust them. Lin Yu lowered his head and looked at his slender hands, teasing himself with a smile. At that time, in order for her to practice her hand feel, Song Tao caught many pikas for her every day. He told her that most animals have 2 acupoints on the back of their necks. When twisted at the same time, the strong force can directly break the neck of the prey, and the weak force can directly cause the opponent to feel pain and dizziness. Human animals are also included. When the gatekeeper asked her to wait here just now, Lin Yu considered whether to twist him unconscious and sneak in. But later on, I realized that there was no need to take risks. Although Lin Yu is not familiar with Lu Yao, he is very familiar with the style of these sorghum sons. There was not a single high-ranking official in the court at this banquet, only some of the children from various families who had not yet served. To be blunt, if all of them died here, Datu would not have any turbulence, and perhaps it would have become even more stable. Since you don't have to worry about being assassinated by assassins, the level of security will definitely not be too strict. Furthermore, who would have thought that a noble woman disguised herself as a merchant woman and sneaked into the banquet venue just to frame an unnecessary marriage for Li Ying? End of this chapter.